May I admit, when I first heard this song, the verses that proverbially grabbed me by the collar were Big Boy's unflinching in its depiction of street survivalism, and Goody Mob's Cujo, sharp as nails in its wordplay. But as I researched the behind the scenes of OutKast's debut album, I realized that I've been listening to Call of the Wild wrong. First, let us be reminded of how the duo came to be. While living with his dad at the less upgraded College Park projects, Dre met fellow Tri-Cities newcomer Antoine Patton, recently moved from Savannah, and formed a fast friendship. I think he was the brother Andre always wanted, Sharon says. The two were kindred athletes, rocking half Lauren and sandals, digging New York City acts like Brand Nubian, and getting into rhyme artistry. There were some little bitty guys that could really rap, recalls OutKast DJ Cutmaster Swift, 29, who knew the pair when they were 16. They had that tight New York style, like Das FX. There was obviously some real hip-hop heads. After a brief flirtation with street hustling for recording money, the two signed to LaFace at age 17 and recorded their pimp-centric debut, Southern Playalistic Cadillac music. Long story short, Andre 3000 and Big Boy were making some of the most detailed and honest descriptions of life in American ghettos before they were able to get driving licenses. The precocious wisdom they displayed in songs such as Crumbling Herb and Get Up, Get Out came at a very high cost. Only from this point I was able to assess how terrifying the song is. The horror film loop sitting quietly in the organized noise-made beat in combination with CeeLo Green's I hear voices in my head and they keep calling me sounds like the disturbed consciousness of a street hustler. And in this song, no verse expresses this mental weightiness better than Andre's opener. No matter how much he tries to cover it in brave-faced bars such as "Y'all can stoop to my level, I'm like the devil or whatever," like Lucifer in a hood movie adaptation of Paradise Lost, but lacking the conviction to reign in hell happier than he would serving in heaven as he raps. To graduate is really becoming a stressful journey. I feel like a steering wheel for them is trying to turn me into a hate monger, and I'm wishing and I wonder, damn, will I graduate before I hit the summer? Dre would eventually obtain his GED, and Southern Playalistic went on to obtain a platinum certification by the RIAA, defying the hold the East and West Coast had in US hip-hop at the time, opening new opportunities for the Atlanta duo to express their unparalleled creativity. But even retrospectively, to witness two black kids from East Point wrestle with the dangers they faced with such attitude and wisdom is, whether for good or bad reasons, something to behold. After the platinum certified success of SPMC, the East-West Coast rap duopoly, instead of either side trying to approximate themselves with the burgeoning Dirty South scene, even to merely make allies in their ongoing beef, kept on ignoring it. Anyone who's familiar with rap history knows about Andre 3000's "The South Has Something to Say" speech at the 1995 Source Awards ceremony and the seismic shift it caused within the genre. What I'm interested on today are Dre and Big's shifts in aesthetics and attitude displayed in their sophomore LP, 1996 AT-Aliens. In its contrast of hard-knocking drums against otherworldly textures, AT-Alien sounds more like the works of trip-hop luminaires such as Portishead, Tricky, and Massive Attack. However, instead of becoming an American version of these Bristolian acts, the Atlanta duo simply became more of themselves, exploring their internal worlds with the same finesse they did for the streets of East Point in their first album. Although less bombastic and more inward-looking than SPMC, or maybe exactly because of it, AT-Aliens served as the most elegant middle finger for all of those who thought the South only produced bass music. There's plenty of bass here, yes, but just as much food for thought in between. Backed by a spacious beat vaguely reminiscent of Portishead's It Could Be Sweet, albeit with a bigger reggae than jazz influence. Elevator's Me and You narrates the rise to fame of Atlanta's most prodigious MCs. In his first verse, Andre name-drops the Martha Rail network that carried him and Big Boy around the city through its ghettos, recording studios, and hole-in-the-wall clubs early on. Big Boy reminisces about the Checkers and Rally's burger joint that placated the hunger him and Dre felt when they were penniless. It's a love letter to the city they came from and that influenced so much of who they were still becoming, but it's a rather unromantic one. Andre's last verse describes a familiar situation to anyone who's just experiencing their first taste of success, especially those who came from an impoverished background. Someone you're barely acquainted with now wants to know what kind of car you drive, how much money you're making, and how many women you're betting. Although you got more fans than the average man, you still live by the beat like he lives check to check, as expressed by Dre's swift flow. The naturally impatient cadence of someone who's already half an hour late for an important appointment and has no time or interest in self-interested adulation. And although things were very much looking up for Dre and Big during the recording of AT-Aliens, show business, much like life in the project, awaited them with its own set of challenges and deterrents. Word on the street is that the writing of Elevators was inspired by a concert at Howard University that featured none other than P. Diddy in its audience. I cannot hear Big Boy's "Mama I want to sing, but Mama I want to trick" and "Mama I'm now" as a sort of unconscious premonition of all that would unravel 2 decades later about music industry's greatest or worst devouring father figure. With AT-Aliens, OutKast not only got to define better who they were as a duo and as individual voices in it, but also to expand their audience, doubling the sales of their debut LP. You think that, at this point, having made some of the most forward-thinking music in rap, the genre's establishment would have finally accepted them as representatives of the culture, right? As its mainstream acceptance grew larger, the focus of hip-hop culture, or at least the most visible sides of it, was swiftly shifting from lyrical prowess, sonic experimentation, and black consciousness to bouncing and shooting, switches, hoes and clothes, and weed. Less De La, Wu-Tang or Tribe, and more Pimp Trick Gangsta Click. In their deepening interest in psychedelia, live instrumentation, the zodiac, and science fiction, in 1998's Aquemini, Dre and Big were totally aware that they were going to alienate a lot of rap listeners. But that alienation was borne by the Aquarian and Gemini MCs like a badge of honor, nowhere else being clearer than Return of the G. Backed by a lush sample taken from Georgia Murder's theme from Midnight Express, the Atlanta duo airs out every single grievance they had towards their detractors. Big Boy just wanna kick back and watch his little girl blow bubbles. However, he'll not hesitate to answer the call of the wild, like he would in his younger, wilder years if his baby girl's life is threatened. And somehow, Andre sounds even more choleric about his and Big's artfulness is being taken by rap's taste-making class. I won't delve too deeply on Dre's verse, although I thoroughly believe it's his best ever and possibly the most important in the history of hip-hop. Its vicious flow and complex rhyme scheme expresses his frustration with the state of the culture better than I ever could. However, I'd like to leave this excerpt from a Stankonia-era interview as a brief reflection. Although OutKast remained committed individualists, it was Dre who made good on the group's name when his mid-90s lifestyle changes, including veganism, sobriety, and green turbans, raised eyebrows among hardcore fans. Whenever you start doing something different, black people tend to think one of two things, he says. Either you're trying to switch for the white people or you're gay. Yet Dre never responded with macho outrage or gay bashing, gestures he counts among the tired rap trends OutKast hopes to avoid. That's something you do just to get people on your side, he says. I mean, I don't know nothing about guys and guys together. I'm still a little bit homophobic, but I want to get better with it. If I'm representing OutKast, that means we stand for anybody who feel like they don't fit in or has another way of doing what they feel. If a brilliant Aquemini wasn't musically progressive enough for you, what Dre and Big had in store for the first Halloween of the third millennium would cement them once and for all not only as two of the most creative voices in hip-hop, but in all of popular music, Stankonia. And no song in it sounds more like a greeting card for Anno Domini 2000 than B.O.B, Bombs Over Baghdad. Who else, at least with the mainstream visibility that they had, would dare try that dizzying 155 BPM jungle / drum and bass inspired groove, plus have an entire section dedicated for a wah-wah tinged guitar solo, and another one with a gospel choir front and center? On the anxious demeanor of her fourth LP, the group took note of new, harder drugs hitting the hip-hop scene and teenagers using ecstasy, cocaine, and methamphetamine. Big Boy reflected, living this life at a fast speed, don't know what's going on around them. If you live fast, you're gonna come out here real fast, so the music needed to show that. And on the sound that defied every single expectation one may have of rap music. While recording Stankonia, the band refrained from listening to hip-hop. That music was starting to sound real comfortable. There wasn't any adventure to it. Instead, the duo drew influence from musicians such as Jimi Hendrix, Little Richard, Prince, and George Clinton, as well as Clinton's Parliament Funkadelic collective. However, the band refrained from producing a throwback sound with a record and instead hoped to utilize these influences in a modern, experimental fashion. Andre 3000 stated that, I don't want this to be the generation that went back to 70s rock. You gotta take it and do new things with it. Through B.O.B's hyperactive rhythms and allusions to West Asian conflicts, the Atlanta duo rose to Y2K's occasion with a creativity and clarity seldom seen. However, inspiring sight 26 years later, amidst a world where chaos's reign only seems more sovereign with each and every day. But not everyone got the memo. OutKast's Big Boy was more than a little surprised when tennis pro Jennifer Capiracci requested recently that bombs be played as a sign of support for the troops in Iraq as she took the court for a match. He watched with equal interest a few days later as radio stations start playing the record in the same Iraq context, and some US troops reportedly sang the song while going into battle. The problem is, Big Boy was strongly opposed to the US invading Iraq without United Nations support, and he never intended the song as a pro-war exercise. Against their own wishes, OutKast ended up making hip-hop's Rock the Casbah. The Clash's funked-up rock tune was supposed to be a mockery of Ayatollah Khomeini's ban of Western music in post-Islamic Revolution Iran. But when Joe Strummer got the word that American troops were blasting it during Operation Desert Storm, he wept. While the distaste Strummer had for Rock the Casbah's success was influential in the Clash's demise, Dre and Big, even somewhat demoralized by having their song used as an imperialist war cry, kept on going. but not for too long, I'm afraid. I'm not interested in the "is Speaker Box for Love Below a true OutKast album or not" debate. The two songs I'm going to talk about, although each missing one of its members, are so much about the duo and the scene they came up from that I was forced to, much like I did in my Deftones edition of 5 songs, break the rules. In Speaker Box's Reset, backed by a jazzy beat of his own making, Big Boy pens one of his most introspective verses, reflecting on fatherhood, in fact, the very nature of being brought into this world, desire, maturing, and the US prison system. Kdubb reflects about how he transformed his racial anger into something healthier. CeeLo criticizes the hedonism he sees perpetrated seemingly everywhere. But all this pondering did not come out of nowhere, for Reset served as a sort of Dungeon Family peace summit. Following CeeLo Green's sudden departure from Goody Mob in 2000 and Kujo Goody's subsequent car accident, the group seemed to be in a sour state. Nonetheless, when the call to collaborate came, both adamantly answered, with Big Boy handpicking his longtime companions for one of Speaker Box's most introspective tracks, Reset. I think in some type of roundabout way, it was kind of an opportunity for us all to showcase together. Me and Goody, we were at industrial odds, not internal odds. We were never uncool, we were always family. With family, you have a sibling rivalry, that internal riffing, and that's to be expected. We're all men, all individuals. They have different opinions, priorities, different focuses, different flaws. The second to last track of A Love Below, Vibrate, sounds like the perfect closer to OutKast's work, Idlewild notwithstanding. The mission statement inscribed by the band's name crystallized to say, "The wagon, come join the band," as a declaration of oneness and not performance, backed by the most surreal of jazz instrumentals. Although the promise of his solo rap debut in Alive in the Day of Benjamin Andre remains incomplete, to see Andre continuously grow as a musical artist has been one of the most inspiring things to see in these past 20 years of music, even if it meant leaving his pen game for occasional guest verses and flutes to be his main muse. No matter the instrument or the format, even 2 decades after their split, Dre and Big continue to inspire us to find our own frequencies, to play along with them with sincerity and passion, and most of all, to refuse what seems spiritually out of key.